Close your eyes. Smell the salt of the Atlantic, the smoke of tobacco warehouses, the sweat of dock workers unloading ships. Hear the clink of mugs in taverns, where merchants whisper about smuggling and soldiers' boots strike the cobblestones. This was colonial America, vibrant, alive, and restless. Tonight, I want to tell you this story differently, because I promise you, you've never heard it explained this way before. This isn't just about taxes and dates in a textbook. This is about how an empire, the greatest in the world, began to lose control of its own children. But what happens when those children discover they don't need their parent anymore? For decades, the colonies thrived under what historians later called salutary neglect. Britain had laws like the Navigation Acts of 1651, which demanded colonial trade run through English ships and ports, but enforcement was loose. Britain was too busy fighting wars in Europe to police every American harbor, so colonists built their own rhythm. New England shipyards turned out vessels as fine as any in London. The South shipped tons of tobacco across the seas. And in shadowed docks, smugglers cut deals with Dutch and French traders, dodging British customs officers with a smile. To colonists, this felt like freedom. To Britain, it was tolerated chaos. And soon, the crown would decide the leash needed tightening. But when you take freedom away from someone who already tasted it, the result is never obedience. In 1754, conflict erupted on the edges of empire. The French and Indian War, America's front of the 7 Years' War, pitted Britain and its colonies against France and its native allies. The wilderness became a battlefield. Red-coated soldiers, unused to ambush, fell in droves. Colonial militias fought beside them, including a young Virginian named George Washington. By 1763, Britain emerged victorious. France surrendered Canada. North America turned red on the map. But the price? Staggering debt, over £130 million. Parliament looked across the ocean and saw the colonies as a source of revenue. Colonists saw something else, broken promises. They had fought, bled, and died for the empire. Now they were told to pay even more. What do you do when the partner you fought beside suddenly treats you like a servant? To add insult to injury, the Crown issued the Proclamation of 1763. It forbade settlement west of the Appalachian Mountains, reserving the land for native nations. For Britain, it was meant to prevent further wars. For colonists, especially those who had dreamed of Western land after the war, it felt like betrayal. Soldiers who had fought for empire returned home, only to be told the land they bled for was off limits. What happens when even the land beneath your feet no longer feels like yours? By mid-century, most colonists were American-born. A farmer in Virginia did not think of himself as English. A Boston merchant built wealth not by London's grace, but by his own ships. Local assemblies, Virginia's House of Burgesses, Massachusetts' General Court, felt close, real, and protective. Parliament in London, distant, arrogant, and disconnected. A new identity was forming. Still British in name, but culturally and emotionally, something else, American. An identity, once claimed, is almost impossible to erase. When people begin to call themselves something new, the old bonds never hold as tightly again. Debt drove Britain to new measures. The Sugar Act of 1764 taxed molasses. The Stamp Act of 1765 required paper, newspapers, even playing cards to carry a paid stamp. To Parliament, these were fair contributions. To colonists, they were shackles. In taverns, debates turned fiery. A Boston merchant slammed his mug down. Why should strangers in London decide what I pay for ink and paper? In Virginia, Patrick Henry thundered in the assembly, "Give me liberty or give me death." These weren't just words. They were sparks. But sparks, when they fall on dry wood, never stay small. Ordinary people joined resistance. Farmers boycotted British imports. Housewives spun homespun cloth in defiance of taxed textiles. Printers circulated pamphlets challenging Britain's authority. Preachers warned of tyranny from their pulpits. Smugglers became folk heroes, defying the empire not for greed, but for justice. Historian Edmund Morgan would later write, "The revolution was effected before the war commenced in the minds and hearts of the people. And in these years, those minds and hearts were turning one by one. What happens when resistance is no longer the act of a few, but the identity of a nation?" The colonies were restless. Britain was determined. Each side believed it was right. The colonies demanded representation. Britain demanded obedience. Neither would yield. And when two sides both refused to bend, history knows what must come next. In the next episode, we step into the streets of Boston. We'll watch as protests turn to riots, as taxes ignite fury, and as ordinary men and women begin to defy the most powerful empire on earth. The revolution has not yet begun, but the fire is about to be lit.